this committee so far for her speech, and also the wonderful job she did chairing this committee. And also, of course, it obviously goes without saying to acknowledge the Secretariat, who, as always, do a wonderful job. I've got to admit that when I first was subbed onto this committee, it wasn't something that I jumped at. I didn't think wasn't that keen on it. It wasn't something that I thought was well and truly within my remit. But very quickly I learnt that it's smack bang in the middle of what I'm here for, and that is to represent regional communities and making sure that regional New South Wales in particular remains the best place to live, work and raise a family. And the more I sunk my teeth into this, the more it became obvious that this is exactly what I should be doing, to make sure that our regional communities are vibrant, because that goes a long way to giving opportunities for people to avoid slipping into loneliness. Regional communities themselves can be incredibly friendly and welcoming places, and they're renowned and famous for doing that. But there's also circumstances in our regional towns that exacerbate loneliness, and we talk about the distance, we talk about the lack of access to other facilities that people do have in metro areas. The other thing is the experience of loneliness in a regional area is very different to what you might experience in a metro area. And obviously not detracting from the experience of loneliness in Sydney, but we need to recognise the differences that people face if we are going to make a change on this space. One of the things that became abundantly clear early on was, you can have the most vibrant, welcoming community you want, but if you can't get to those communities, you can't get to those events, then it's all for nothing. So the importance of transport was very obvious in this committee, particularly for regional areas. And I talk about people, if someone loses their licence through whatever reason, medical, or they've done the wrong thing, or they've aged out of it, that really takes away a lot of their agency to be able to go to different events by themselves. And that can force further withdrawal away from other things. The other aspect that comes into that, of course, is the cost of living at the moment. And the previous speaker spoke of, the socio-economic impacts of loneliness. But, with the price of fuel, the damage that driving long distances can do to your car, that all adds up over time. So people start having to make decisions. And to go to the actual recommendations, recommendation 11 was to acknowledge the importance of transport. And then recommendation 12 talked about alternative transport options to be considered. Being a good national I am, I obviously pushed to try and get the regional seniors travel card put back into one of the recommendations, but they're the sort of things that we need to be thinking of to somehow overcome these transport barriers that people have. Something that I've always believed and long spoken about is how important our community groups and our clubs are for holding our communities together. They're at the front line of combating loneliness, the symptoms, but also right back at the cause of them as well. If you can have people that are engaged in community, they have a network there, it provides a safety net for people that when things do go wrong in their life that could lead you into a path of loneliness, they already have those people around them to try and prevent that, to help soften that blow. So we need to make sure our rugby clubs, tennis clubs, bridge clubs, men's sheds, run clubs, whatever they are strong throughout regional New South Wales. They give that opportunity for connection, but also they provide that sort of a red flag. If someone stops turning up to cricket training that they've gone to every week this year, or stop coming to cards on a Wednesday night, that's a bit of a flag. And when people around them know that person, they can quickly go, well, Jono's not here today, let's give him a call and see what's going on. The other thing these clubs can do, and I think specifically of a group like the CWA, that they have that sort of flow-on effect as well. They build on that, where people going to the CWA have that network around them, but then the CWA themselves put on an event that also combats loneliness. It might be a drinks day or a high tea that they put on that helps build to that community. I know I do cop a few jibes and some giggles every time I stand here and congratulate someone for winning the comp, or a new footy team starting up in Condo. But I'm okay to cop then because I know how critical these clubs and organisations are to our community. And this inquiry just highlighted the importance of them in combating loneliness, and also preemptively as well. As I mentioned before, if you're part of a group, you've got your friends, You've got your groups that you can lean on to provide that safety net. The other thing, particularly in regional areas, are the importance of the events that are on. We all talk about how friendly, rural people are, and they all know everyone in town. But if you live out of town on a farm, you might be an hour and a half from that town, which means you only get together a couple of times a year, maybe at the show or the camp draft or the old boys rugby match. If one of those events is cancelled, that has a big impact on your social calendar. If the camp draft's not on that year because of cattle tick, that hurts your social connectivity. If the show's washed out, if the footy club doesn't go ahead, that hurts that local community. Another aspect the inquiry touched on was the importance of public spaces, where people can come out and meet within the built environment that often promotes that connection. I remember working for a charity during the drought. We threw our support behind a tennis camp that was run in Kiddow. This was great fun for the kids. They got to come and hit tennis balls on this very hot day at Easter time, but it wasn't really about them or finding the next tennis star. It was so mum and dad or whoever was looking after those kids of that day could come along to the tennis club, help cook the barbecue, hand out ice creams, make sure everyone was wearing sunscreen. But while they were doing that, they were chatting about what was going on at home, how everyone was, and what might be coming up in the future. So those facilities that we probably don't have to the same level as you do in metro areas, your tennis club, your local green spaces. Green spaces sounds an obvious thing, but again, during the drought, people didn't have technically green spaces because there was no grass growing. For these people to be able to go out and actually stand on a bit of green grass through the drought was quite an important thing. We provided, again with that charity, shade cloth to different areas so they could get in out of the heat. So recommendation 9, I think, talks specifically about that to support prioritise the development of green spaces. A lot of these green spaces, of course, are funded by grants, and it's becoming harder and harder for these groups to get grants, particularly in our smaller regional communities, when they're up against grant funding applications from people with professional grant writers in places like Newcastle and Wollongong. So I just do need to touch on that does make it harder for the cricket club to get the lights, which might seem frivolous, but could be the lifeblood of that small community. I want to touch on the Welcome experience, and we did have a recommendation looking into that. That seems like a great program, and I think that can be expanded. At the moment, it is in limited council areas and also limits what is essential workers. But we need to remember that in these regional areas, everyone is essential. The lady that works at the local rural supply shop could be the president of the show society. The local mechanic might be the coach of the soccer team. All these things are critical. And the other thing the Welcome experience did was incorporated partners into that. If someone was moving to town, they helped them find that job, but also helped connect their partners into part of that community that they might want to be on. Of course, I want a big shout out to the committee, particularly for coming to Orange. One of the first things when I did realise this was important was discuss how can we get a first-hand experience of the regional perspective of this. So I thank the Chair for agreeing to take one of these hearings out to Orange, and thank the Honourable Bob Nanva and the Chair, the Honourable Dr Sarah Kane, for coming out to Orange for that experience, and of course the committee. It was very critical that we had these regional voices heard. It became very clear throughout the inquiry, loneliness is a huge problem right across New South Wales, and it's growing. The modern world has us more connected, updated, more productive than ever, but it seems we're losing genuine connection. We can't have the solution to this, just that medical treatment. This person has a problem, here's the solution. Here's the medicine to fix that problem. We need to be looking upstream. How do we make sure our communities are thriving so that people don't fall into loneliness? The other thing I do want to say quickly is if you are someone out there in these communities with good connections, you've got a good group of friends, you've got good family, you've got a part of a good sports club, take it upon yourself to put your arm around someone who might not be so fortunate. Play your part in building a connected society. And finally, this was a good committee to be on. It's a good example of how these inquiries can work well together. This is my first interaction, of course, with the Chair, who proved to be a very different person than I thought she was given the stage of this House. And we all worked very well together, And thank you very much for everyone involved. Let's all work together to make a better community.